you're going to see these kids with backpacks. I love how everybody's put those things together for Mickey to do the backpacks this week. And Julie, we appreciate you taking them over there next week. And Candy was supposed to be here today, but she was afraid of getting COVID, which is understandable. But we think about like kids that are learning how to be safe in this world. And that is the relationship that's talked about a lot in the Bible. It talks about how we're like God's children, that sees God as either a father or a mother figure, as someone who can help us, guide us, and teach us things, and help us to know the right way. And one of the things that we know is that God will always want to hold our hand. That is a definite. In Isaiah 41:13, it says, "For the Lord, the Lord your God will hold your right hand, saying to you, 'Fear not, I will help you.'" And I think sometimes we feel very alone, but it's because we've let go, as opposed to God. God is still there, and we know that there are times when things happen. And if you can remember your childhood, and think about being about Flora's age, and you're holding that child's hand, and then the child stumbles. And you pick that child up. Well, God's the same way. And you'll not hit as hard if you'll hang on to God's hand. And it says that if we fall, that we can rejoice because God's going to help us get back up again. That if we feel like we're walking in darkness, that God can be our light. And next week we'll talk a little bit more about talking with God on this walk. We were talking at breakfast this morning about people who would or wouldn't get the vaccines. And we sort of see ourselves as in this situation where God is an authoritarian. And we completely rely on God's pulling us back into the fold. But the truth is we have free will. And it really is encouraged in the Bible for us to go to God. That God is right there. You know, the verse in Matthew 7, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door will be opened to you," means to continually seek, continually knock, continually ask for God's will to be known to you. So you're always going to be able to find God's hand if you reach for God's hand or reach in with God's hand. The poem that Julie read was written in 1657, and it was written in German. It's an old Anabaptist tune, one of the first Anabaptist tunes. And it's about reflecting inwardly and listening to God. And the word trust there comes from a German word that means to suffer. So we're asking God to make us trust. And sometimes when life is really difficult, trusting God is the best that we can do. Even if we don't feel like God has our hand. I frequently would hold Jay's hand when he was younger, and my hand would go to sleep. And his hand would go to sleep, but we were still connected. We may not have felt that, but we were still connected. And if you think about what happens to us on this walk with God, that if we're not being very submissive, if what we're doing is a little chaotic, the world is already so chaotic. Our jobs as individuals is to not give in or give more reason for the chaos. To be someone that's calmly walking through life. And we do this by depending on God. Sometimes we think we know a lot more than God. And we say, well, we did that last year, and this is what I learned, and you're like pulling God back the other way. Are you thinking, oh, I know what to do, I have already known that. Why do I need to be thinking about spirituality or how this is going to affect love or how this is going to affect our society? Why would I want to care like that? And you're pulling God along until you finally let go. And that kind of rebellion can be dangerous. Those of us who have had kids know what it's like for them to let go and run into a street or down the street, and we can't run after them as fast as they can go. Especially at the age that this child is showing here. And I think for a lot of us, when it comes to Christianity or how stable we are, we're still in that little rebellious stage. We still want to show that we're independent and we can do this all by ourselves. And the truth is we need God. We need God's guidance. And sometimes we're just unwilling to move. I don't know if any of you have had children that would not want to go anywhere, but right now I want to stay right where I am. I don't want to go, I don't want to leave so-and-so's house, and so they scream, cry as they go out the door. They want to stay there with their friends. Think about how that can apply to life. Sometimes we just don't want to move. And God's moving us to the next stage. God's moving us to the next thing. And we just have to stand up and not just cling. It's understandable to be frightened about new things, but it's not new to God. God made science. God made all the algorithms that are out there. God made math. God made this world like it is, and there's nothing that God doesn't know. So listening to your inner spirit, listening to the God within you, and listening to the God within others is extremely important. And then there are times when we're angry or bitter, and we just don't want to hear. We don't want to hold God's hand because we're not getting our way. It's not what we want, so no, we're not doing that. And it leaves us vulnerable. It leaves us in the middle of a chaotic time on a very busy road without the supervision and guidance that we could have if we just stopped and listened. It says a lot in the Bible about this walk. One is, it won't be like everybody else's. You're going to have your own way of doing things with God. God's going to lead you individually in the way that you should go. And there are going to be times that you feel like it's in darkness and you just don't know what to do. And God's going to be that light for you. If you remember being a child in the dark, thinking that, monsters under the bed or in the closet, those kinds of things that are normal for any child feels that way. Because when the lights are off, your imagination just goes all over. When the lights are off in our soul, our imagination just goes all over. It's important to stay in the light and to keep that light on so that we'll know what we're being asked to do. And then think about how we are with each other and who you're walking with. Your partner, your friend, your co-workers, your children, your family. When they get off or go off on their own, it says don't snatch them back. It says gently guide them back. Gently keep them on the road. Don't berate. You know, you see the parents that scream and yell at a child, and the child listens even less. So it's the same with God. God's going to be gentle, and we need to be gentle. Gentleness, kindness, mercy, the fruit of the Spirit. And when we do that, we can be good companions to people along the way. And it's up to us to, take somebody's hand and be really, listen to them. And where do they want to go? What do they want to do? Where do they feel led? What do they need? Because they're important too. And lastly, as a church, as a congregation, how can we walk with each other? How can we encourage one another? I know that with the virus around, it is really hard to feel like, oh, I want to be with people. But there are other ways. If we certainly feel like we don't want to be around people, there are other ways we still have to try to stay connected. And if you say, well, I don't need that, what if the other person does? It's not just you. So opening up and being of good encouragement to others, being of good support to others is very important. It's important for us to never give up that connection, to never stop gathering together. I'll leave you with the last one. If you think back on Micah, what does the Lord require of us? If you think about the idea of a parent and child or children walking down the road, you want them to be just. You want them to love and be kind to one another. And you want them to not be arrogant and to listen. So that if we have to say, there's a car coming, or watch your step, they can hear you. You want them to listen. And that's the same way with God. If we want to have this walk with God, we need to be humble. It's not about being so scared I have to grab God's hand. It's not about there's a relationship there. That you happily hold God's hand. You happily open yourself to God's presence. You happily ask for guidance and direction. And that only comes with humility and humbleness. So when we open ourselves and we're able to be vulnerable to that of God and others. I'm not saying that surround yourself with people that are running down the sidewalk of life. But if you surround yourself with people who are also listening and talking. I grew up in a family that if you wanted to talk, you interrupted. That's what you had to do. And as an adult, it's really hard for me to get back and not do that. But if I was going to have a voice in my family, I had to interrupt. We don't want to have to do that to one another. Not in any way. And not in any way that's going to distract us from hearing God or knowing what God's will is. So the idea is to walk humbly. And when we do that, we surround ourselves with people that are walking humbly as well. They want to be there because it's not like everybody has a different God. We all are serving the same God. The God of love and compassion and grace and mercy. months and months.